I want to briefly discuss a paper I recently published with Dr. Emmanuel Osafo of the Washington State University on tempered radicalism as an approach to revisiting indigenous forms of critical human resource development. The paper draws on the concept of a tempered radical approach to provide a framework for critical human resource development. It explores how these view can contribute to developing HR who possess the requisite tools and character to function efficiently in the 21st century and beyond. Recently, there has been a body of literature expanding the field of HRD into realms of national, international human capacity building, and research in the area of international or global HRD has also been on the rise. But um, despite the inclusion of the international dimension to the definition of HRD, many important aspects of HRD, such as culture, context, and politics, are not addressed adequately in these definitions. However, several contemporary views on HRD are focused on the challenges and policy failures that have impeded HRD efforts in developing economies like Ghana, where uh, both authors are from, where we were born and nurtured. Many scholars have attributed these failures to factors such as bribery and corruption, with little or no mention of neglect of indigenous knowledge forms in the planning and implementation of programs. The literature found on human resource development, HRD in Ghana, is no exception. So in our research, we discussed the need to revisit indigenous forms of developing the human resource in effort to reshape education and HRD to meet the current needs of Ghana's socio-economic development agenda. We use the tempered radical approach to guide our discussion and provide a pathway to developing HR with context appropriate knowledge, skills, and character to make a meaningful impact on Ghana's socio-economic development. When we talk about tempered radicals, they are people who identify with and are committed to their organizations and are also committed to a cause, community, or ideology that is fundamentally different from and possibly at odds with the dominant culture of their organization. Tempered radicals archetypically perceive their environment differently from the mainstream because of systemic bias against their social identity groups, cultural differences, or different values. So we in our paper, we suggest a policy direction that focuses on creating a synergy between modern science and traditional or indigenous ecological knowledge to enhance human resource development for economic growth. Numerous research findings have confirmed the vitality of indigenous knowledge in research and human resource development. Our proposition is that interfacing uh, indigenous ecological knowledge systems with Western epistemology will enhance HRD in Ghana and create a citizenry with a clear sense of traditional identity. So we view critical human resource development approach as fundamental in this effort. The tempered radicalism proposed in our paper is aimed at providing a comprehensive model of education and critical human resource development in Ghana, but not to suggest a complete deviation from current practices. Thus, we seek to make significant adjustment to meet specific local education and critical human resource development needs. Meeting these local needs requires education and HRD leadership and policymakers to be abreast with information on specific issues confronting the various communities they serve, and include such knowledge in their education and HRD policy design and implementation, thereby developing such desired need-based human resource for socio-economic development. We presented the tempered radicalism approach as the quintessential model for education and HRD initiatives in Ghana. This is because the small win strategy uh, within the tempered radicalism approach will ensure gradual but effective, concrete, and complete and sustainable achievement in education and HRD for economic growth. Also, the local, spontaneous, authentic action strategy will ensure that the indigenous people who have a better understanding of the ecology and socio-political systems will have a voice in the development effort that affects their livelihoods. It will also help to identify problems as they occur and authenticate interventions that benefit their cause while negotiating to suppress those that threaten their livelihood. So in our view, this approach will yield four main outcomes to guide education and HRD planning and implementation in Ghana. One, focusing on history, ethics as defined by the local people within the context in which work is performed. The emotional orientation and the local politics will inform strategies that will achieve the need-based HRD that we proposed in our critical human resource development concept. Two, achieving the need-based HRD goals will inspire people to develop an interest in training and development agenda that otherwise may seem foreign and therefore limited in purposefulness. Three, achieving the need-based HRD goals will further highlight HRD's relevance in the Ghanaian system, thereby having the propensity to attract funding and improve overall performance. And lastly, for our synergistic alignment conceptual framework will guide human resource development planning and implementation, not only in Ghana, but can be remodeled to suit other contexts. The mediating role of the tempered radicalism will help modify the strictness with which education and HRD programs are executed. Over the years, education and human resource development policymakers in Ghana have been abolishing existing programs and replacing them with new ones that are also born out of a foreign epistemology. Human resource development researchers are encouraged to focus more on the synergistic alignment between modern science and indigenous ecological knowledge to achieve optimum outcomes from their efforts. So to conclude my brief overview of research and paper, I'll say the history of HRD in Ghana has its roots in the pre-colonial era. The indigenous people placed a high value on kin inheritance, such that indigenous workforce development efforts focus mainly on the consanguinity-like principle. In most cases, people will train their kin to take over from them as they age or when they die. The appearance of the European and Ghanaian soil occasioned a new era in workforce development, where indigenous forms of HRD were eventually vitiated with a new approach that uses the Western epistemology to educating, training, and developing human resources. Even though this new approach presented a lot of benefits, there have been challenges because of its emphasis on Western epistemology with little or no attention to the indigenous ecological knowledge. Many interventions and educational reform programs based on the recommendations of the Bretton Woods institutions, International Monetary Fund, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, the World Bank, and other international organizations have been implemented with little success. Notably among them are the Structural Adjustment Program in the 1980s, the F-Cube in the 1990s, the National Education Reform, Growth and Poverty Reduction Strategy 2006 to 2009, and many more. Ironically, none of these interventions have achieved the intended goals at satisfactory levels. So in our view, these programs fail to achieve the intended outcomes because they are built on Western epistemological and methodical consideration, with little attention to the indigenous forms that espouse the values and beliefs of the beneficiaries. We recommend the use of a social justice-like approach to human resource development, our concept of critical HRD, to ensure equity and a steady socioeconomic growth and development for optimum benefit to the local communities. Efficient use of local resources, employability, inclusiveness, ethical orientation, emotional control, contextualize principles underline our critical human resource development concept proposed in our paper. Finally, we reiterate the need for more in-depth knowledge of the indigenous history, politics, local strategies used over time to develop human resources, emotional control, ethical orientation, and contextualization as key to the successful implementation of education and HRD programs. Our conceptual framework explains how the synergy between modern science and indigenous ecological knowledge will help inform policy decisions on HRD to ideally benefit the actors. The tempered radicalism approach to change, which serves as the mediator in our synergistic alignment, is instrumental in this effort describing. Our study opens up several leads for further research. It's not the end. Our complete system dynamics modeling of conceptualization of critical our conceptualization of critical human resource development will be a fascinating study where all unintended consequences emanating from our proposed move to the need-based HRD will be established. There's also the need to empirically test the mediator variables we have proposed in our conceptual framework within a context-specific environment. And a comparative study between Ghana and other emerging economies, such as South Korea, where there's a relative success in achieving a synergy between the indigenous ecological knowledge and modern science, could be done using the tempered radicalism approach elucidated in our paper. So thank you for listening to me. This is a brief overview of our paper. Please download the paper and read, and do not hesitate to send me any questions you have. If you do not have access to the paper, let me know and we'll send you a copy. Thank you.